In 2001, Michael Jackson collapsed behind closed doors and was rushed to the hospital under the strictest secrecy. No cameras, no statements, no explanations. The reason, however, was far more disturbing than anyone imagined, and the people who were there that night say it changed Michael forever. What happened just hours before his hospitalization? Who was with him when everything went wrong? And what truth did Michael confess from his hospital bed that still haunts those who heard it? This is the story the world was never meant to hear. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss our emotional stories about Michael Jackson. Los Angeles, late summer, 2001. The house was quiet in the way only expensive homes ever are. Too quiet, too still, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Michael Jackson stood alone in his bedroom, staring at his reflection in the mirror. The room was dim, lit only by the city glow through curtains. He had been standing there for almost 20 minutes without moving. His chest felt tight, not painful, heavy. Earlier that evening, something had happened that refused to leave his mind. A conversation, a revelation, a sentence spoken by someone he trusted. The words kept echoing inside him. "They're coming after you." Michael had laughed at first. Then he saw the fear in the man's eyes. Now, standing there alone, his heart began to race. He pressed his palm against his chest, breathing slowly, in through the nose, out through the mouth. It didn't help. His hands started to shake. Michael walked to the bed and sat down, his head in his hands. "Calm down," he whispered to himself. "You're okay." But he wasn't. His breathing became shallow. The room felt too small. The silence felt loud. He tried to stand again and nearly fell. The door opened. It was his longtime assistant, Mark. "Michael?" Mark froze when he saw his face. "What's wrong?" Michael looked up, eyes wide. I can't catch my breath." Mark rushed aside. "Did you eat today?" Michael shook his head. "Drink anything?" "No." Mark knelt. "Michael, talk to me." Michael swallowed hard. "They know things," he whispered. "Things I never told anyone." Mark's heart dropped. "Who told you that?" Michael hesitated. Then he said the name of someone who had been part of his inner circle for years. Mark's face went pale. "Michael, that's not good." The room began to spin. Michael grabbed the edge of the bed. "Something's wrong with me." Mark reached for the phone. "I'm calling for help." Michael shook his head violently. No hospitals. No press. But when Michael's lips began to turn pale and his body started to tremble, Mark didn't hesitate. Within minutes, the house was full of quiet urgency. No sirens, no lights, just whispered instructions and controlled movement. Michael was guided into a car. As they drove through the dark Los Angeles streets, Michael stared out the window, his reflection floating in the glass. "Mark," he whispered. "Yes." "If I don't wake up tomorrow, tell my children I tried to be brave." Mark's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The hospital door slid open. And nothing in Michael's life would feel the same again after what he would confess inside that room. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and cold air. Michael lay on a narrow bed, the thin blanket pulled to his chest, heart monitor beeping in a slow, steady rhythm that felt far too loud in the quiet room. The fluorescent lights made everything look unreal, like a scene from someone else's life. A nurse adjusted the floor and spoke softly. "You're safe now, Mr. Jackson. Try to relax." Michael nodded, but his mind refused to slow. Mark sat in the corner, arms folded, watching every movement with fear he wasn't trying to hide. When the door closed and the room finally fell silent, Michael whispered, "Mark, close the curtain." Mark did. The world outside vanished. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Michael said the words he had been holding inside for weeks. "It wasn't just a warning," he said. Mark leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Michael's eyes drifted toward the ceiling. "They showed me something." "Who?" "The same person I told you about earlier." He hesitated. "They said they had proof. Documents. Recordings. Conversations I had years ago. Things taken out of context. Twisted." Mark felt his stomach tightened. Blackmail? Michael nodded once. They said if I didn't do what they wanted, the world would believe the worst version of me. Mark exhaled slowly. What did they want? Michael closed his eyes. Money, control, silence. Mark shook his head. You should have told me. Michael's voice cracked. I was ashamed. I thought I could handle it. A doctor entered the room, reading the chart. You had a severe stress response, he said. Panic attack, dehydration, exhaustion. Your body shut down to protect you. Michael swallowed. I thought I was dying. The doctor's voice softened. Your body thought so too. After the doctor left, Michael stared at his hands. I don't feel safe, he whispered. Mark stood and placed a hand on his shoulder. You are. We're here. Michael's breath shook. Not from them. From the world. From being misunderstood. He turned his head toward Mark. I'm tired of running from rumors, from lies, from fear. I'm tired of being afraid that the truth will never matter. Mark sat beside him. You don't have to face this alone. Michael nodded, but the words didn't quite reach him. Later that night, Catherine arrived. She took one look at her son and knew. Oh, Michael. She sat beside him and held his face the way she had when he was a boy. What happened? She asked. Michael hesitated, then told her everything. The warning, the threats, the fear, the collapse. Catherine's jaw tightened with quiet strength. No one controls you, she said. Not anymore. Michael's eyes filled. I don't want to live like this. Catherine squeezed his hand. Then you won't. When Catherine and Mark stepped out to speak with the doctors, Michael was left alone with the steady beep of the monitor. He stared at the wall, and in that silence, a realization formed inside him. If he continued this way, hiding, fearing, carrying everything by himself, his body would break again. Not someday. Soon, the door opened. It was a familiar face, his longtime friend and advisor, Evan. Evan closed the door behind him. They told me you were here. Michael managed a weak smile. Surprise? Evan, Saturday, you scared us. Michael nodded. I scare myself. They talked for a long time. About the threats, the pressure, the exhaustion. Evan finally said, you need to disappear for a while. Michael looked at him. Not from the world. From the noise. From the people who are poisoning your peace. Michael whispered, I don't know how to stop. Evan met his eyes. Then let your body force you. The monitor beeped steadily. Michael closed his eyes. For the first time that night, he allowed himself to cry. Not loudly. Just enough. Because something inside him finally understood. The hospital wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of a decision he could no longer avoid. And that decision would change the course of everything that followed. Morning light crept into the hospital room through a narrow slit in the curtains, painting the walls with pale gold. Michael had not slept. Every time he closed his eyes, the words came back. The warning, the threat, the fear. His body felt fragile like glass. The doctor returned with test results and a firm expression. Your heart is under severe strain. Your stress levels are dangerously high. If you continue this way, your body will force you to stop again. Michael stared at the floor. What happens if I don't? He asked. The doctor paused. You won't like the answer. After the doctor left, Catherine sat beside him in silence. Michael, she said gently, you can't keep carrying everything by yourself. Michael shook his head. I don't know how not to. She brushed his hair back from his face. Then you learn. That afternoon, Evan returned with papers in hand. I've arranged something, he said. Michael frowned. Arrange what? A place, far from here. No cameras, no calls, no visitors. Just you, rest, and doctors you can trust. Michael hesitated. The thought of vanishing terrified him almost as much as staying. But then his chest tightened again, just slightly, enough to remind him of the night before. Okay, he whispered. They discharged him 2 days later under strict privacy. The car drove him away from Los Angeles before sunrise. As the city disappeared behind them, Michael felt something loosen inside him. The new place was quiet, remote, surrounded by trees and open sky. The air smelled like pine and rain. Michael spent the first week sleeping, the second week walking, the third week thinking. He began writing again, not songs, but truths. He wrote about fear, about loneliness, about the pressure being everyone's dream and no one's real person. One evening, sitting by the fire, he whispered to himself, "I don't know who I am without the noise." The answer came slowly. Weeks turned into months. Michael's color returned. His hands stopped shaking. The nightmares faded. But the world outside was not waiting. Rumors spread. Questions grew. The people who had threatened him began sending messages again. Evan brought the phone to him one night. "They haven't stopped." Michael read the message. And for the first time, he didn't feel fear. He felt something else. Resolve. He handed the phone back. "I'm done hiding." Evan raised an eyebrow. "What are you going to do?" Michael's voice was steady. "Tell the truth." Evan studied him. "That will shake everything." Michael nodded. "It needs to." He returned to Los Angeles weeks later, not as a man who collapsed, but as someone who had decided to stop running. He called a private meeting with his legal team. He told them everything. The threats, the blackmail, the fear. Silence filled the room when he finished. One lawyer finally said, "We can protect you. But once this starts, it won't stop." Michael met his eyes. "I know." And in that moment, Michael Jackson stopped being the hunted man. He became the one who refused to be hunted anymore. But the confrontation he was about to face would be the hardest of his life. The conference room on Wilshire Boulevard was quiet when Michael arrived. No press, no entourage, only the people who had lived inside his storm for years. His attorneys, Evan, 2 investigators he had hired in absolute secrecy. Michael sat at the long table, his hands folded, his posture calm in a way that felt unfamiliar, not forced, not performed. Centered, one of the investigators placed a thick folder in front of him. "We trace the origin of the threats," she said. "They don't come from fans, journalists, or opportunists. They come from someone who once had access." Michael's jaw tightened. "Access to what?" "To your private correspondence, your recordings, your financial movements, your life." The folder opened. Names, dates, images. Michael's chest tightened when he saw the first photograph. A man he had trusted. A man who had sat in his living room. A man who had once told him, "I'll always protect you." Michael's voice dropped. "He promised me loyalty." The investigator nodded. "And sold it." They explained how the blackmail network had formed, how documents had been twisted, how fragmented conversations were edited into something that could be weaponized. Michael closed his eyes. "This is why I collapsed," he whispered. The investigator nodded. "Your body reached its limit before your mind did." They discussed the plan. Legal action. Protective measures. And a decision Michael had feared for years. Exposure. "Once this becomes public," the attorney said, "there will be noise. People will question everything. You'll be dragged through memories you thought you buried." Michael inhaled slowly. "I already live there." The meeting ended with silence. Michael walked alone into the late afternoon sun, the city humming around him. He called Catherine. "I'm going to tell the world the truth," he said. She didn't hesitate. "Then I'm standing with you." That night, Michael returned to his house and opened the window. The air was warm, quiet. He thought about the boy he had been, the one who had learned too early that love came with expectations. He whispered, "I'm done letting fear decide for me." 2 weeks later, the statement was released. Not sensational, not defensive, honest. Michael spoke of pressure, betrayal, fear, exhaustion, and a collapse that forced him to confront the life he had been living. He did not name names. He did not accuse publicly. But he made one thing clear: "I will no longer live in silence." The reaction was immediate. Support poured in. So did doubt. The people behind the blackmail panicked. They reached out again. This time, Michael didn't respond. Instead, he handed everything to the authorities. The confrontation that followed was brutal. Courtrooms, interviews, closed doors. Michael stood firm, and though the world's noise roared louder than ever, Something inside him was finally quiet, because for the first time in years, his life was no longer being controlled by fear. But the cost of that freedom would soon reveal itself, because when you stop running, the past comes rushing toward you. The world did not slow down when Michael stopped running. If anything, it accelerated. The moment his statement was released, the air around him grew thick with memory. Every decade of his life came rushing forward. Interviews resurfaced, old footage replayed, forgotten stories clawed their way back into the present. Commentators dissected his words. Supporters defended him. Critics sharpened their knives. Michael watched none of it. He stayed inside his home, walking the same halls where he had once hidden as a child, where laughter and loneliness had lived side by side. The quiet was no longer peaceful. It was heavy, pressing against his chest in a way he had not felt since the night he collapsed. Catherine sat with him often, sometimes speaking, sometimes simply being there. One afternoon, she said softly, "This is the part no one tells you about. Healing hurts too." Michael nodded. He had believed that choosing truth would immediately bring relief. Instead, it felt like opening a door he had spent his entire life barricading. Old faces began appearing again. Former collaborators, friends he had lost touch with, people who claimed to know him better than he knew himself. Some offered comfort. Others offered judgment wrapped in concern. And then there were the letters, boxes of them, from fans who had grown up with his voice, from strangers who wrote that his courage gave them their own, from people who admitted they had believed lies once, but now wanted to believe something better. Michael read many of them late at night, sitting on the edge of his bed, the lamp glowing softly beside him. One letter stayed in his hands longer than the rest. "I don't know what's true about your life," it said, "but I know your music saved mine. If you're tired, it's okay to rest. We'll still be here." Michael closed his eyes. The investigation continued in silence behind closed doors. Names that once felt untouchable were suddenly fragile. Stories that terrified him for years began unraveling under the weight of their own contradictions. Truth moved slowly, but it moved. Yet even as the storm outside shifted, the real battle unfolded inside him. Michael began dreaming again, not of stages, of his childhood bedroom, of sitting alone at the foot of his bed, waiting for someone to come tell him it was safe to stop. One night, he woke up gasping, his heart pounding as if he were back in the hospital room. He pressed his palm against his chest, whispering, "I'm here. I'm okay. I'm here." But fear does not disappear just because we confront it. It lingers. Evan visited him one afternoon and found him staring out the window. "You're changing," Evan said. Michael didn't look away. "I'm trying. You don't have to be strong all the time." Michael finally turned. "I don't know how not to be." Evan smiled sadly. "Neither did the boy you used to be." That sentence stayed with him. Over the next weeks, Michael began doing something new, something terrifying. He started saying no. No to interviews. No to appearances. No to the people who demanded more than he could give. For the first time in his life, he allowed himself to be unavailable. The world did not collapse. The sky did not fall. What had happened was quieter and far more dangerous. He began feeling the grief he had buried under music, the anger he had swallowed with smiles, the exhaustion he had mistaken for destiny. Some nights he cried without knowing why. Other nights he felt nothing at all. Catherine found him one evening sitting on the floor of his room, his back against the bed, his eyes hollow. "What's wrong, Michael?" she asked. He shook his head. "I don't know who I am without the pain." She knelt in front of him and held his face. "Then you get to discover him." Those words terrified him, because pain had been his compass for so long. The case reached its breaking point months later. Agreements were made, evidence sealed. Certain people disappeared quietly from his life forever. The danger that had once hovered over him began to dissolve. But peace did not arrive the way he expected. Instead, an emptiness followed. When fear leaves, it takes its noise with it. And suddenly, there is room to hear everything else. Michael began walking alone at night, barefoot across the grass of his garden, breathing in the dark, listening to the wind. He started writing again, not songs, but letters he never sent. Letters to his younger self. Letters to his children. Letters to the boy who had been too afraid to stop performing. In one letter he wrote, "I thought the world would end if I slowed down, but it was only my life beginning." As autumn arrived, Michael felt something inside him soften. He smiled more easily. He laughed without forcing it. He slept, but the cost of all that silence soon arrived in an unexpected form. One morning, he received a call. It was from the hospital, the same one he'd been rushed into months earlier. The doctor's voice was calm but serious. "Mr. Jackson, we need to discuss your results in person." Michael closed his eyes. He knew that tone. When he hung up, he stood very still in the center of the room. The past had caught up with him, not through enemies, not through the world, through his body, and what the doctors were about to tell him would change the way he looked at every single day that followed. Because sometimes the price of surviving is finally learning how fragile life truly is. The hospital corridor felt too familiar. The same pale walls, the same sterile smell, the same quiet that pressed against Michael's chest before the door even closed behind him. He sat alone in the consultation room, his hands folded tightly in his lap, his foot tapping against the floor without him realizing it. Every breath felt heavier than the last. He had survived fear, betrayal, and the slow collapse of his world. But this was different. This was his body. The doctor entered with a file tucked under his arm. He looked tired, serious, careful with every movement. He took a seat across from Michael and didn't open the file right away. "How are you feeling?" the doctor asked. Michael gave a faint smile. "I've felt better." The doctor nodded. "Your tests show severe exhaustion, long-term stress damage, and a heart condition that has been developing quietly for years. Your collapse was not an accident. It was a warning." Michael swallowed. "A warning of what?" "That your body is reaching its limit." The words echoed in the room. Michael leaned back slowly in the chair. His hands began to tremble again, the same way they had that night when he couldn't breathe. "Can it be fixed?" he asked. The doctor hesitated. "It can be managed, but only if you change the way you live." Michael stared at the wall. He thought of the nights without sleep, the years of running, the constant pressure to be everything for everyone. "What happens if I don't?" he asked. The doctor met his eyes. "Then your body will make the decision for you." Michael nodded once. The doctor continued. "No tours, no extreme schedules, no ignoring rest, no carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." Michael almost laughed. Almost. When the doctor left, Michael sat in silence, the reality of his life settling into his bones. He wasn't invincible. He never had been. He drove home slowly, windows open, letting the air hit his face. The city moved around him like nothing had changed, yet everything inside him had. At home, he didn't go inside. He walked the garden paths, barefoot, feeling the grass under his feet. He stopped near the old oak tree and leaned against it, closing his eyes. "I don't want to die," he whispered. Later that evening, he gathered the people closest to him, Catherine, his children, Evan, and a few trusted friends. They sat in the living room, the lights low, the mood heavy. Michael told them everything. No dramatics, no fear, just truth. Paris's eyes filled with tears. Prince stared at the floor. Catherine reached for Michael's hand and held it as if she could keep him anchored to the earth by sheer will. "You're going to rest," Catherine said firmly. "You're going to listen to your body." Michael nodded. "I promise." The days that followed were quiet. He canceled everything. He disconnected from the world. He began learning how to exist without urgency. Some mornings he woke up confused, unsure what to do with the silence. But slowly, he began filling it with simple things. Walking, writing, drawing with his children, sitting outside at night and watching the stars. For the first time in his life, Michael Jackson was not chasing time. He was living inside it. One afternoon, as he lay on the grass with blanket beside him, the boy asked, "Daddy, are you okay now?" Michael smiled softly. "I'm learning how to be." The truth was, he still felt fear, but it no longer ruled him. He began therapy, something he had avoided for years. He talked about the boy inside him who had never learned how to stop. He talked about the weight of being loved by millions, but understood by so few. He talked about how the world had shaped him, and how he was finally trying to shape himself. And slowly, something inside him began to heal. But healing is not linear. Some nights, the fear returned. Some nights, his chest tightened, reminding him how fragile everything still was. And then came the call. A producer he had once trusted wanted to discuss a massive new project. The offer was everything the old Michael would have jumped at. Global stages, spotlight, legacy. Michael listened quietly. When the call ended, he stared at the phone for a long time. He felt the pull of the past. He felt the weight of expectation. And he felt something else. Peace. He placed the phone face down and walked outside. The sky was burning orange as the sun sank below the hills. He whispered, "Not this time." That decision, quiet, unseen, uncelebrated, was the bravest thing he had ever done, because for the first time, Michael Jackson chose life over legend. And the consequences of that choice were about to unfold in ways no one expected. Because sometimes the greatest battle begins after the world believes you are finally safe. Winter arrived quietly that year, as if the world itself had learned how to move more gently around him. Michael spent most of his days at home, wrapped in sweaters, walking slowly through the garden, drinking tea he once ignored, sitting for long stretches of time doing nothing at all. The old rhythm of his life, the endless calls, the constant movement, the pressure to exist at full volume, had faded into something softer, something almost unrecognizable. At first, the silence frightened him. He had lived so long inside noise that he did not know what to do with the absence of it. Some mornings he woke up expecting urgency and found only sunlight on the wall and the distant sound of birds outside the window. He began writing again, not for albums, not for the world, but for himself. Pages filled with thoughts he had never allowed himself to think. One entry read, "I was always running because I thought if I stopped, I would disappear. Now that I have stopped, I finally feel real." The world, however, had not forgotten him. Offers kept coming. Interviews, performances, projects promising history, legacy, redemption. His phone rang constantly. At first, he answered. Then he stopped. One afternoon, Evan found him sitting on the back steps, watching the sky. "You know they won't stop," Evan said. Michael nodded. "I know. You okay with that?" Michael didn't answer immediately. He watched the clouds drift slowly across the blue. "I spent my whole life belonging to the world," he finally said. "I'm trying to learn how to belong to myself." Evan smiled. "That's a dangerous thing for a legend." Michael smiled back. "I'm tired of being a legend." The doctor's appointments continued. The numbers were improving, slowly, carefully. But the message remained the same. His body would never tolerate the life he used to live. And for the first time, that truth did not feel like a loss. It felt like permission. One night, Michael woke from a dream where he was standing on a stage, the crowd screaming his name, the lights burning his eyes. He stood frozen, unable to move, unable to speak. Then the dream shifted, and he was alone in the garden, barefoot, his children laughing somewhere nearby, the sky wide and calm. He woke with tears on his face, not from fear, from relief. Weeks later, a letter arrived, handwritten, no return address. Inside were only 6 words. "The world is waiting for you." Michael folded the paper slowly and placed it in the drawer with the others. He never answered, because something inside him had finally changed. He began spending more time with his children. Long dinners, late-night movies, quiet conversations that never made headlines. Paris told him one night, "You're different." He nodded. "I hope so. You seem here." He smiled. "I am." Yet even as peace settled around him, another truth grew heavier inside his chest. He knew this life, this slow, fragile, precious life, would not last forever. The diagnosis had not promised him decades. It had promised him time. And time, he was learning, was the most dangerous gift of all. One evening, Catherine joined him on the porch as the sun disappeared behind the hills. "You look tired," she said. He nodded. "In a good way." She watched him carefully. "Do you regret anything?" Michael thought for a long moment. I regret the years I spent believing I had to suffer to matter. She took his hand. You don't. He smiled. I know that now. The world continued to knock. He continued not to answer. But something else began to happen. Fans who lived nearby started leaving letters at the gate. Not demanding, not begging, just thanking. One letter said, I don't need you on stage. I just need to know you're alive and okay. Michael held that one for a long time. The seasons shifted. Spring returned. Michael's health remained fragile, but stable. He followed every instruction, rested when he needed, laughed more than he had in years. Yet there were days when his chest tightened for no reason, reminding him that peace does not erase what lives inside the body. One afternoon, while walking the garden path, he suddenly stopped, breath shallow, hand pressed against his heart. The old fear rose. He closed his eyes. I'm here, he whispered. I'm okay. It passed, but it left him shaken. That night, he wrote another letter. This one for his children, not to be read now, to be found later, because something inside him was preparing, not in fear, in honesty. And though the world did not know it yet, Michael Jackson was quietly approaching the most important chapter of his life. Not as a star, not as a legend, but as a man learning, at last, how to let go. And the final choice he was about to make would leave everyone who loved him forever changed.